Hey guys, it's Coach Dan Ryan. I got a great lesson that I want you to watch on critical path analysis coming up. All right, and at the end of that, you're going to learn everything you need from day one diagrams to day zero diagrams to float, slack, bleed, lag, critical path, forward pass, backwards pass. All right, so watch the entire lesson. And when it's over, you're going to come back here and I'm going to solve this entire network diagram for you doing a forward and a backward pass. All right, so I'll see you in class. Hey everybody, it's Coach Dan Ryan, PMP trainer, and we're going to look at this slide deck today about why we use critical path analysis. And we're going to do a network diagram example. All right, and stick around to the end where I go back to the whiteboard and do that forward pass, backwards pass with you. All right, so why use critical path analysis? Well, we need to calculate the end date for the project, to calculate the float or slack that might exist, and to identify, in terms of the schedule, the critical path activity. What is critical path? A project's critical path is the combination of activities that, if any are delayed, the same delay will be seen on the project finish date. Critical path is the longest path between project start and finish. Also sitting on the critical path, they are called the critical activities. Take note, critical activities have zero float. All right, so implication number one here is that any finish, delay, advance to critical activities will have the same effect on the project finish date. So if a critical path activity is delayed for 2 days, your project end date will be delayed for 2 days. Critical activities should use the more experienced team members on the team, and they should have their status reviewed more regularly. All right, another implication is that non-critical activities have float. So activities that do not live on the critical path can have float, and float is also known as slack. All right, let's get into some of the dependency types that we see between activities. For example, there could be external dependencies to your project as you're trying to control the scope. Maybe there's been a new software release, or you have to go before the planning board or look at an installation manual. So some external dependencies. We also have something called discretionary dependencies. All right, this is informal. You want to make the chicken first, you can make the chicken first. You want to do the salad first, you can do the salad first. It can be done in either order. Now, mandatory dependencies, on the other hand, they have to be done in a certain sequence to be successful. Now, when we want to delay the start of a subsequent activity, we can use something called the lag. All right, a lag is something that delays the scheduling or the starting of a subsequent activity. So in this case, we want to use a 24-hour lag period to allow the concrete to dry. Now, a lead, on the other hand, will accelerate the start of the subsequent activity. So we're designing and coding software, but even 3 days prior to finishing doing that, we can start testing the software. All right, and that is somewhat of a fast tracking situation. They're doing tasks in parallel. All right, and there can be many different types of dependency combinations. We can have finish to start. For example, the build will start 5 weeks after the design has finished. Or how about start to start, meaning that the second activity will start only when after the first one has started. Or finish to finish. The build will finish 15 weeks after the design has finished. And finally, start to finish. The build will finish 40 weeks after the design has started. All right, so those are the different dependency combinations. And again, the critical path calculation is key here to know the longest path through the network. So in this case, if you add up the durations, you can see activity B and activity C are compared, and activity B has got 2 extra weeks in it. So the critical path is up top there, and that's a total of 7 weeks, while the bottom path is only 5 weeks. So that's the non-critical path. All right, now let's talk about the forward pass. We know that these network diagrams can be day 1 or day 0 diagrams. Let's talk about day 1 first. For example, here we have a network diagram with 3 paths through the network. All right, and the day will start on day 1. Project starts on day 1. And one day with a 1-day duration, it could finish the same day. It might be very late at night, but it could finish the same day. All right, activity D can also start on day 1. All right, 1 plus 3, including day 3, means it could end on day 3. All right, again, that's early start plus duration minus 1 equals early finish. All right, so A and D are done. Now it's time to start activity B up top. That's going to start the next day. That's going to start on day 2. And 2 plus a duration of 2 minus 1 is 3. All right, down below, activity E starts on the day after 3. And 4 plus 4 minus 1 is 7. Now, we can see here that activity C is going to be linked to activity E because activity C starts on day 8. 8 plus 2 minus 1 is 9. Down below, activity F will start on day 8. 8 plus 1 minus 1. All right, you see how this works? Up top with a G, we're going to start on 10, end on 12. H begins on 9 and ends on 9. So we can see that the longest path through the network, all right, was activity D, E, C, G. And the total duration was 12. All right, so now we've done our forward pass. We swing that 12 around down below and we start paying it backwards. We give it to G, we give it to H, and then we start subtracting durations, moving right to left. 12 minus 3 plus 1, 12 minus 1 plus 1. All right, and we walk it backwards pass, subtracting the durations until we go all the way back there. All right, so that's how your forward pass and your backwards pass works on a day 1 diagram. All right, now the float for this one, you'll see activity A has 4 days of float, activity B has 4, activity F has 3, and activity H has 3 as well, because those are all non-critical path activities. Again, our critical path goes like this. All right, how about we take a look at the day 0 side of things? We'll do a forward pass on a day 0 diagram. And again here, forward pass number rule is just carry forward for one feeding into several, one task feeding into several. So in this case here, you can see that activity A, all right, just goes forward and feeds into both B and C, giving them a 2 on both of them. Now, as we progress, we are going to take the largest number in terms of the early finish. We're going to take the largest number, right? 3 is smaller than 5. And we're going to feed the largest number forward to be the early start of the subsequent activity. Even for a 1-to-1, when there's not, like this is 2-to-1, but even if it's just a 1-to-1, you'll just carry the number forward. Okay. All right. So we get to the end of the diagram and we take the longest date, the 7, we switch it around down to the bottom and we say we're going to start going backwards. And rule number 1, we go for 1 into several, we carry the number back. All right. So we had an end date of 7 and we subtracted 2 weeks from it to get 5. And now 5 is going to pay back to those other activities. All right, now we continue. We gave the 5 to both B and C, but we subtract our durations, and over here we get 2, while over here we get 4. And the thing is that when we were going forward, we put the highest number forward, but when we're going backwards, all right, we do the lowest number backwards. So in this case, 2 is the one that we will feed back to activity A. All right, so I want you to think about this activity node box drawn like this sometimes, right? You have your duration, how long the activity should take, early start, early finish, late start, late finish. And be careful, sometimes the float or the slack number will be down here, but the duration will be a number up here. All right, but what you want to do is, for the exam, you want to focus on either the back pair or the front pair. And that's how you'll know if you're dealing with an activity on the critical path. If the difference is 0, the task is critical. If the difference is not 0, the task is not critical. All right, so let's do an illustrated example. All right, and we'll start off with a day 0 diagram for this construction project that we're doing. And if it starts on day 0, all right, day 0 is a little different now. 0 plus 2 is 2, right? So the rule number 1 is add the duration. Okay, and then we know that we're going to transfer that 1 into many. So that 2 is going to get paid forward. Now with the day 1 diagram, all right, when we went from the 1 to the next one, all right, we went up a number. All right, but that's the big difference here. With the day 0 diagram, we use the number that finishes the prior activity to start the subsequent activity. So in this case, we're going to feed 2 forward to build walls, electrics, and erect roof. All right, so this is a little different because the day 0 diagram makes it appear as if the predecessor and the subsequent activity are both going on the same day. Don't try to overfigure it out. Just know the difference about that. It's the one difference between day 0 and day 1 diagrams. All right, let's do the math. 2 plus 3, 5, 2 plus 2, 4, 2 plus 7, 9. All right, good. Now we've got early finishes for those 3 activities. All right, now down on the bottom there, fit front door, we learned before about just paying it forward, right? Even if it was 1-to-1. So we'll just drag that 9 over there. Up top, we want to take the higher value between build walls and electrics, right? The highest number. So we are going to use 5. All right, and 5 plus 4 is 9, and down below, 9 plus 5 is 14. All right, so now which one's going to go to add fittings? Is it going to be 9 or is it going to be 14? The bigger one, of course, 14, and then 14 plus 6 is 20. Now we're ready to do our backwards pass because we know that 20 is the earliest finish time. All right, now for the backwards pass, please. All right, let's take that 20 and let's swap that 20 and transfer it down below and start subtracting the durations. Well, in this case, we wind up with 14 for add fittings. That's a critical path activity clearly. Early start and early finish are both the same. Same with late finish and late start. And now we transfer the 14 backwards to fit windows and to fit front door. And we start doing our math, right? 14 minus 10 is 10. 14 minus 5 is 9. We know that on the bottom, the 9 just slides right over. But up top, the 10 also slides over because it's 1 into several, not several into 1. And then we keep subtracting. 10 minus 3 is 7. 10 minus 2 is 8. And 9 minus 7 is 2. All right, now we're faced with 7, 8, or 2 for build walls, electrics, and erect roof to say which one should we drag back to the finish for foundations. And that will be the lowest number out of the 3 choices, which is going to be 2. And of course, 2 minus 2 is 0. All right, I hope you found that helpful. You know, critical path analysis is a sequence of activities through the network from start to finish. They use these activity nodes to represent the different data elements within it. And the critical path represents the shortest time that the project can be completed. Again, focus for your exam either on the front vertical pair or the back vertical pair. Okay, because on a critical path activity, there should be no difference between those numbers. All right, if the numbers are the same, the activity is critical. Now, if the numbers are different, the difference is the total float. All right, so let's peek at this again. All right, we are looking at 0, 0, 0, and 0 because that was the critical path. So 0 float on the critical path. By definition, critical tasks have 0 float. All right, but if we look at the other non-critical path, we see that there is float as well. All right, total float is the amount of delay an activity can absorb before it delays the project end date. All right, by definition, critical tasks have 0 float, but here we have 5, we have 6 on electrics, and we have 5 on fit windows. Again, we are focusing on the pairs and seeing that there is a difference. All right, now, as we talk about the different types of float, we know that free float is the time by which an activity may be delayed or extended without affecting the start of any succeeding activity. Total float and free float may or may not be the same. Free float equals the early start of the next activity minus the early finish of the activity in question or the predecessor. Why do we go through all of this? Why do we sequence the activities like that? Well, these network diagrams will allow us to know not only the logical order for these activities to occur, but we also need to estimate durations. We need to assess the number of work periods needed to complete an activity. All right, and this should be done by experts and people who are most familiar with the work. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. And now let's go back to the whiteboard to solve out that network diagram I was talking to you about before. Guys, thanks for sticking around. Hope you really enjoyed that lesson on critical path analysis. Now it's time to solve this network diagram. All right, so the first thing to take note is that, guys, this is a day 1 diagram, which means the project starts on day 1. All right, which means that both activity A and activity B can start as early as day 1. All right, now this box here stands for early start. You know, all of them have early start there, but we're just showing you on A, early start, early finish, late start, late finish. All right, so the earliest the activity could start, the earliest it could finish, the latest it could start, and the latest it could finish. All right, so it could start as early as day 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to say 1 plus 3 minus 1 is 3. That's how it works on the day 1 diagrams, right? We've got this formula here you can use as a cheat: early finish plus duration minus 1 equals early finish. So, I'm sorry, that's not early finish. That's going to be early start, right? So early start, 1 plus 3 minus 1 equals 3. All right, very good. Now, activity B could also start as early as day 1, and with a duration of 1, it also would finish on the same day, right? 1 plus 1 minus 1 is 1. All right, now we can see here that activity C is constrained by activity A, which means that C cannot begin until A finishes, and A doesn't finish until 3. So what number day will C start on? Will it start on 3? No, because that's the day that A is finishing. It will start on day 4. All right, 4 plus 2 minus 1. Activity C ends on day 5. That means activity E begins on day 6. All right, 6 plus 3 minus 1 means that activity E ends on day 8. All right, now we've already done the forward pass for B, C, and E by virtue of having done B before. So now this is the last piece on the forward passes that we have to do here. So if activity B could finish as early as day 1. That means that activity D could begin as early as day 2. 2 plus 5 minus 1 is 6. All right, so now we're taking a look here, and we see that we have 3 paths through the network. 3 paths, I believe. A, C, E. All right, we've got B, C, E, and we've got BD. So let's add up the full length of each pass. Let's start with ACE. 3 plus 2 plus 3. That's 8, right? So the first path has a total duration of 8. What about BCE? 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 is 6. Okay, so far ACE is the longest, and B and D is 5 plus 1, and that's 6. So the longest path, the critical path, is the top path, ACE, right? Like this. That is your critical path. And since it's the critical path, we know it's the longest path through the network. Since it's the longest path through the network, that's also the day that the project finishes. All right, so now we've done our forward pass, and it's time to come around and go doing the backward pass. In your mind, I want you to think of just sort of swapping this 8 down around underneath to the bottom. All right, and then you're going to pay it backwards, right? So you're going to bring it up to here, 8, and you're going to bring it over here, 8. All right, now you've got your end dates for E, your late finish for E, and your late finish for D is 8. All right, so now we're going to come backwards, okay? Now we know, here's a little trick for you. We know that on the critical path, the early start and the late start, as well as the early finish and the late finish, should always be the same. There should be 0 difference between the front pair or the back pair. So in that case, we would be able to say, all right, since we know this is the critical path, we're just going to fill in all the remaining values. And now we've done our first backwards pass, finish ECA start. Now we got to go finish ECB. All right, we've already done E and C, so now we just need to go from C down to B. All right, so if activity C can finish as late as day 4, what is the latest that activity B could finish without impacting that 4, right? And the answer is activity B would have to finish no later than day 3, otherwise causing a delay to day 4. And if it could finish as late as day 3, and it was only a 1-day duration, that means that it would also be able to begin as late as day 3. So activity B could have started as early as day 1 and finished on day 1. Or we could have waited and started on day 3 and still finished on day 3 and not impacted the start of activity C. All right, so now we've done the second backwards pass. Now we're going to do the final one here from finish to D. We already did. It's 8. All right, in this case, we're going to go 8 minus 5 plus 1, which is going to be the inverse sort of this. All right, so 8 minus 5 is 3 plus 1 is 4. All right, so that is a forward pass and a backwards pass on this network diagram. It had 3 paths. ACE was the critical path. All right, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.